Welcome to Mental Health Without Borders, the global wellness podcast with Dr. Lindsay Frey, where we dive into the complexities of mental health from a global perspective, exploring how different cultures approach wellness and what we can learn from one another. This episode is sponsored by Finding Hope Wellness Center in Tampa, Florida, where individuals, families, and couples can go to receive hope and healing for their mental health. Go to www.findinghopewellnesscenter.com to find out more. So let's get started. Today, we are joined by a special guest who will be sharing their unique insights on this topic, and we're thrilled to have Dr. Carole Trilokekar. Nice
Hi.
to meet you, and thank you so much for joining me on this episode.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. So I wanted to know a little bit about you to begin with. So I know that you have different specialties and you have lots of amazing things going on right now. So can you introduce a little bit about yourself and what you are doing?
Sure. So I'm a psychologist. I'm based out of Vancouver, Canada. However, I do travel quite a bit. So I've created these bases for myself in Mazatlan, Mexico, in Hua Hin, Thailand, and our last base that we're setting up right now is in Algarve, Portugal. So my 3 kids and my husband and I, we travel through these bases throughout the year. And my practice is international. It's online. So my clients are kind of all over the globe at this point, but I am a trauma-focused therapist, and I work primarily with executives and globally displaced communities.
Okay, wow, that is really fascinating. And I absolutely love that you are introducing your children as well to travel, and your family travels with you. And so when you say you have these bases, what does that look like? What does that look like for you and your family?
Right. So basically, the very first time we kind of started to adopt this concept was around COVID. We've always, when you take a trip somewhere and you say, we should really come and live here, and you have this idea because you love the place.
All the time.
We've been doing that all the time, right? And we've been doing this for years. For years, we've had, been going to these places and love these places. So the very first one during COVID, because everything moved online, I said to my husband, let's just try out this format. Let's see how this works. So our first base we created was Mazatlan, Mexico, which isn't too far from Vancouver. And we decided we were just going to close up shop and, sell the big house, but keep a small base for ourselves. We came to Mazatlan, we checked it out. We lived here for 6 months, got the kids into an online program, but also put them into an international school just so they could socialize. And many communities offer that. They allow kids to go to school part-time and allows them to learn the language, understand the culture. And in the meantime, I work online and I learn, as I've been moving from one culture to the next, I've taken a little bit of a pivot in terms of the type of therapies I offer. So now I lean way more into somatic and EMDR because I feel like that transcends culture a little more. It's not so much talk therapy based, which sometimes works when you're working cross-culturally. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you probably have had to pivot and change as you're, encountering new cultures, even living in new places. You just get such a different perspective so many times. And again, it's fantastic that you're gifting that to your kiddos as well. And can you kind of go back and tell me about your journey and what initially inspired you to become a therapist before you started doing some of these amazing things?
So I've always found myself drawn to stories, the quiet ones, the complicated ones, the ones we don't really talk about that much. So, and I also come from a multicultural background. I moved a lot as a child. I lived in the Middle East during the Gulf War. I lived we were born and raised in Kuwait. And I lived there for many years. So the Gulf War happened at I would say a very pivotal time. I was 9 years old enough to understand. 9 years old was, it was a time where I could figure out what was going on around me, but at the same time, young enough that my parents did shield me from the big traumas, let's say. But that really, I think, was the start of having me understand and absorb the world around me. We traveled so much as children, but I think, it's very different when you live in a place and you see things happen and you live there long term versus when you just go to vacation somewhere. So that really opened up my eyes, and I started to carry the sensitivity and curiosity of how people lived and survived in different parts of the world. So I think it just became a natural path for me that I would go into a field like therapy and something along those lines. So I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be of service. I didn't say psychologist at that point. Interestingly, I wanted to be a neurosurgeon, and when I went into my undergrad degree, that was the intention. And somewhere along that line, along the way, that pivoted, and here I am as a psychologist. But I think the difference today is I've shaped more of a global practice. It blends traditional therapeutic methods more with the culturally grounded approach. So I've sort of just created this niche for myself, and yeah, but that's where it came from.
Yeah, so it sounds like from early on, you had an interest in really understanding people, understanding cultures. And so it just became kind of a natural path, because I found with so many different therapists that there was something early on, either in their story or the way they were raised, that kind of led them to being interested in these things that kind of, helped them on their journey. And so you did a lot of traveling too when you were young.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not stopped.
Yeah, it's not stopped. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And now you're introducing your kiddos. That's so great. And are you in Mexico right now? I heard you say 6 months.
I am in Mexico. The minute the cold hits, I start to move. And then when the rain starts, I'll move. I mean, I'm just so driven by sunshine and beach and just, and that's another one for me, myself. I've recognized my mental wellness lies very much in my environment and the weather. So I myself am impacted by that. So I move around based on what resonates for myself, what works for my family. And yeah, so if I can hear the ocean and I can be in the sunshine, then fantastic. Why not?
Yes, I can completely relate to that. I grew up in the cold, moved to Florida when I was in my mid-20s, but it was because of the sunshine and the beach. So I definitely understand that. And I can see how that can impact mental health in a positive way too. It doesn't resonate with everyone to be in the sunshine. Sometimes it is to be in the cold, but at the same time, I do think that that's important. And I encourage people too to kind of consider that when they're not really happy with where they are. Is that making a difference on your mood and your emotions and your functioning? Every day you have a chance to change it. It's not always easy, but
100%.
you can.
You can, or you can just take a little bit of a break and,
Yes.
explore different. We live in a time where that is possible. Once upon a time, I could see how that would be a little bit more difficult for a lot of people to do. And sometimes I think people don't see the path or don't see how that's possible. And that is one of the things I actually do through one of my websites, Learn, Travel, Play. We document just my life with my kids and just feel like, hey, you know what? We're business owners. We have professional degrees and, professional practices. We have kids, we have families, but you can do it. You can make it work for yourself if you want to.
Yes. Yes, I was going to ask you about that. So it's the Learn, Travel, Play Global Initiatives Foundation, and that's something that you had founded.
Yes. We started that as we started to travel. I truly believe in the idea of, live globally, but support locally. So in each of the communities we go into and make that our base, we also want to, I encourage my kids to, let's become part of this community and let's understand how we can contribute to it. It's not just about taking, but, sharing. And, one of the things I've done along the way is as you get to know the local people, you understand them. There's different, things that are needed in different communities right across the board. So I find a way to be of service and different communities require different things. So for example, when we went to Guatemala, one of the things that I found really lovely was the macadamia farms. And I didn't know this at the time, but it was the macadamia trees contribute the highest amount of oxygen to the environment. So I was like, well, that's great. Like, how do we get involved and how do we support this cause? And then we said, okay, let's start sourcing the macadamia nuts from here for products that we were creating. And let's start promoting that. So it's not about going in and try to help a community. It's about helping them become economically sustainable, and creating those structures for them, because they know what they're doing. They're very, very well, like it's come through generations, whatever their skills are. It's just a matter of creating a structure and for them to be able to that bridge to become economically sustainable. Same thing in Fiji. We traveled to Fiji, and over there, again, the indigenous communities do have the land, and they grow these beautiful medicines, and they have so many natural products. And when I started to look at all those products, I said, hey, like the rest of the world would benefit if they knew these things. Like so many women that suffer from infertility, they have these beautiful, age-old customs that have passed through the years. And it's not a challenge for them. They just know all this stuff, And again, during COVID, a lot of it was lost, or they were suffering economically. And I said, hey, why don't we set up the system where you guys can share this and pass this on to different generations? So there we're building a cultural center. It's called the Sotatali Cultural Center. And really it is about the elders passing on those age-old customs and traditions and all that knowledge to the new generations that are typically just getting involved in travel and tourism. So that's getting lost. So again, it's just one of those things of just giving them the tools to help them thrive. And so we've started to do that in different communities. We've got about 3 or 4 projects underway. My goal is 45. It's ambitious, but I'll get there slowly but surely as I build the team and, get more awareness for these causes. I hope to get there. Yeah.
That sounds like very, very rewarding work on top of what you're already doing. And so if people wanted to find out more about it or help or support it, how could they find more about this foundation?
So right now we're building out the website. It's called Learn Travel Play. Well, it's called ltpglobal.org. And initially it was learntravelplay.com, which is where we were talking about what my family does and traveling. And also we had a section where you could see the different projects. However, now as I'm moving ahead and it's becoming bigger, we've realized that in order to get grants or get support, we have to have something a little bit more formal, and it needs to follow certain structures. So now we've just opened up a separate website under the foundation's name where we keep building it out and sharing for each project. And it's a lot because, we're trying to promote the products and the education that each of these different communities are delivering and offering, and creating partnerships with different educational institutes across the world where this information can be taught and can be shared, and creating these cross-cultural programs. So it's in the works right now. We're hoping to launch April 18th, the actual website. So it's coming up really soon. Might be a little bit of a delay here and there, but it's going to be there. But right now, learntravelplay.com holds a bit of the information, but the .org will be on its way in just a few short weeks, actually.
Okay, great. And we will update it on the show notes. And then if anything changes, we will update that as well. And so hopefully by the time this comes out, we will have the most updated information for you, because it sounds like such a great foundation. And I'm sure people that are listening are going to be interested in following that path and journey, and hopefully helping to support it too, because that's a great cause. Absolutely. Yeah. And thank you for doing that for the community. And so going back to kind of therapy and coaching, some of the things that you're doing with clients, I know that you said you're working with clients across the globe. So are you seeing common struggles that people face, even though they're coming from different places?
Yes, 100%. So I think one of the biggest challenges we face is how mental health is perceived, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in some cultures, it's very stigmatized. In other ones, it's just fully dismissed, like it's not even a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And for other cultures, it's more of it's a communal spiritual idea. So across cultures, the themes are surprisingly similar. There's lack of trust, shame, disconnection, the burden of unprocessed trauma. You know, being a trauma focused therapist, you see that a lot. Things that have maybe come up in childhood, but the expression of how that plays out varies.
Mm-hmm.
So in some, it's overworking. They want to overperform and just, out of sight, out of mind. We're just gonna laser focus in on work. For others, it's just completely shutting down, and yet for others, it's survival mode. So they
Mm-hmm.
look like, for example, especially because I work with executives, it looks like they're high functioning individuals, but they're just in survival mode. So in my area of work, or at least with the clients I work with, that seems to be the common thread. But yeah, it's more similar than we think. It just plays out differently in different
Yeah.
people.
And that was a big question when I started this, was just what are some of the commonalities and some of the differences across cultures that we're facing today? And I know in the US, we struggle a lot with overwork, which then a lot of times lends itself to high anxiety, high
Yeah.
stress, sometimes depression. These kind of things are pretty common. And I tie a lot of it back to this productivity mentality and a lack of balance and a lack of wellness that I find is it's so important that we establish that, in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like you're doing that for yourself, which we'll talk about in a little bit, some of your own just practices that kind of keep you healthy and well. Are you seeing outside kind of cultural or societal factors that are impacting mental health? Because like I said, here, there's a big emphasis on work and productivity, but are you seeing that as well? Some common factors?
One of them is access to healthy and nutritional food.
Mm-hmm.
It is a huge one. I know you don't generally hear that, but it is a huge factor in many communities. It impacts their health, which in turn impacts their financial and economic stability, and then that impacts their mental health. So it's just a chain. It all
Mm-hmm.
just one is the next is the next. So I would say, and I'm not talking about play like when I was a little bit, my parents their catchphrase was like, well, do you think if you waste your food, some child in Africa, like this is the way they think about it? No, this is much closer to home. I'm talking about right here. Well, in Vancouver, for example, there are so many people who just don't have access to healthy food.
Mm-hmm.
Inflation is through the roof. A lot of middle class families, let's say, are finding it harder and harder to provide healthy, nutritious meals for their families. And this very much carries on into all aspects of wellness. So it's very
Mm-hmm.
prevalent. I would say it's much bigger than we think it is. Access to good health care, just the system itself, it's overburdened, especially
Mm-hmm.
post COVID. It's very difficult for individuals to get access to healthcare. It takes a
Mm-hmm.
long time to get through the system for someone who needs help. And that's part of what I do working outside the system and traveling is my way of even contributing to how do you get to those people who want the help, need the help, but the system's just bogging it down, and how do we bypass that till we fix it?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if I answered your question, but I would
Yes.
say nutrition and the system. These are the two that I've identified as key factors in
Mm-hmm.
today's world.
Mm-hmm. Well, I really honor and respect the fact that it seems like when you see a challenge, you try to meet that challenge with a creative solution for it, right?
Yeah, I try to think outside the box as much as possible. You learn the systems, you perfect the systems. We as therapists and psychologists and people in the wellness industry, we put so much time into learning. It's constant, that information, it never ends. And so at times it gets a little bit challenging as to we have so much we want to offer. I mean, so many of us get into that profession for that reason. So how can we best deliver? And sometimes it requires a little bit outside the box.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it does. And and one of the things that you said with the nutritional meals, we were talking about it a little bit before we recorded the episode, just the importance of the basics. So, I would even kind of step in and say, if you don't have access to healthcare readily and you are maybe on a wait list for therapy, some important things that you can do if you have access, is to really watch what you're putting in your body. So making sure you're having nutritious meals, making sure you're paying attention to that and how that can impact your mental health, making sure you get outside, making sure you walk, making sure your sleep is good, and you have good sleep patterns. Some of these things we can do to help ourselves. We might still need the addition of a therapist or therapy support, but these things can't be understated as how important they are to benefit our mental health.
Definitely. It's like that pillar, those pillars you were talking about, or that, like a table with all the legs. I mean, sometimes we underestimate. I have so many clients that come in and, they're so stressed out and they think they need professional help. And they're like, I'm just, and I start with the basics. Hey, what are you eating? How much are you sleeping? When's the last time you took a time for yourself? What do you do for you time? And a lot of times, they just go really silent with those questions because they're like, well, I didn't come here for that. I'm like, well, what did you come here for? And sometimes it is really that, like you said, starting with the basics, eat, sleep, just those basic things. Like we have to be reminded about them. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the first things I do with an adult is when they come in is I give them a self-care assessment and I have them go home, fill it out, and then bring it back. And what are your thoughts on it? And they already have tons of thoughts on the things that they're doing that are good and then some things that they can do better. And they start implementing them right away. It's just that maybe they needed a reminder on how important that was, for their mental health and their overall wellness.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I do see that there are still areas that still have the mental health stigma. However, I also see that mental health over the last 10 years or so that I've been practicing, it's gained a lot more global attention. And so I wonder if you are seeing the same thing and if you have any ideas on why that, what might be driving that shift to more of a mental health focus.
I think one of the good things, if I can say that, if one of the positive things that came out of COVID was that realization of everyone has to close up and we're going to just block everything off. Now everyone's going to get very isolated. And the minute that happened, I think people started to really think about what that means. Before we would take it for granted. I could be in my community and I wouldn't see a friend for weeks on end, months on end, until it's a birthday or Christmas or some special occasion. So we'd really just see someone maybe once, or, 2 or 3 times a year, if you're lucky. And all of a sudden, when we were told, hey, you can't leave your home or you're not allowed to interact beyond your pod of immediate people, that's when everyone started to say, well, when am I going to go see this person and how am I going to interact? And I think we started to really think about how that impacts our mental health. I think that became, started to increase in value. A lot of the practitioners, doctors I talked to at the time, they were seeing an increase. I had my daughter actually on March 27th of 2020. That was right when COVID took effect, like in Vancouver, Canada. That was the time. And so I remember going to the hospital by myself. I was not allowed to have anyone else in there. You were going to go in there by yourself and have your baby and come out because whoever went into that room had to stay in that room. So my husband couldn't come into that room because the kids were there and he had to take care of them. I had that baby on Friday. The following Friday, I was back at work because it was so quick to see how people were dealing with anxiety, how people were stressing out about it. And so people in the medical profession and wellness and therapists and all of it, they really saw that come to the forefront at COVID. I would say COVID was a turning point and it just started to skyrocket from there. So I didn't take a break. I haven't taken a break since
Mm-hmm.
March 2020. I very clearly remember that date in my head because that's when everything went the other way and it's became a global phenomenon. And everyone
Mm-hmm.
started to say, hey, we're so focused on COVID, but let's talk about mental health. Let's talk about how people are coping through this, the stress it's causing for just right across the board, for kids, not having them go to school, for older
Mm-hmm.
people being isolated in their homes, for young parents who needed the support systems, just everyone across the board. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where it started. If I had to pinpoint why mental health just became now this global thing that we're all talking about, that that specific date comes to mind for
Mm-hmm.
me.
Absolutely. There were so many different things I saw in my practice too. A lot of high stress, anxiety, depression, and then I saw a lot of isolation. And so one of the things that I really recognized, in my practice is the thing that you said, the importance of socialization and connection that maybe we did maybe take for granted prior to COVID. you know
Yeah.
um, and something else I saw was the connection between even self-esteem and self-confidence in teenagers and socialization. So when they see a
Mm-hmm.
friend and they say, it's so nice to see you, it's been a while, all these good things and these compliments, and they weren't receiving that, there was a dip in self-esteem
Yeah.
because they weren't having those social connections with their friends. And so that was interesting. So now it guides some of my practice. I'm sure some of the things that happen still probably guide your practice as well, where if I do start to see a kiddo, losing self-confidence, I'm asking about their socialization. I'm asking about their
Yeah.
friendships and their circle and how they're being supported. So a lot of things have been guided by that, going
Mm-hmm.
through COVID and seeing the impacts of it. It was a really big deal. And you're right, there was a lot more talk about mental health during that time and after, because of just the impact of it, the isolation and the challenges that we all kind of globally went through, and the stress of it, of course. um,
Yeah.
and so I wanted to also mention, because we haven't mentioned it yet, that you are actively involved with the Canadian Mental Health Association, and you have a platform for Miss Universe Canada 2025. Is that correct? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that sometimes takes people by surprise. They're like,
Mm-hmm.
and what else are
And
you doing?
mm-hmm.
um, I thought about it long and hard.
Mm-hmm.
I was involved in pageants, I want to say 20 years ago, a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, see, I'm aging myself. But I think the trajectory of pageants, or let's just say the perception of what pageants were once upon a time, that stigma still kind of sometimes runs through, but it's
Mm-hmm.
changed so much. And a couple of the reasons that I chose to get involved was, first of all, because it's a platform to raise awareness about trauma recovery, mental
Mm-hmm.
wellness, and female empowerment. But also particularly because I'm doing Learn, Travel, Play global initiatives, I wanted to talk about women who come from vulnerable communities. A lot of the work we do, some of them is with displaced women that are coming out of trafficking. And I think it's a place where I was, again, when I think of out of the box, pageantry is not one of those conventional places you go. So I wanted to take it there. I wanted to talk about mental health advocacy for the actual contestants that are involved, for the causes that they promote, and to also change that perception of who are the individuals that actually participate in these events. So Canadian mental health, this year we're slated to raise over, I think it's over $200,000,
Wow.
just within a couple of, like, about 3 months. And this is from one pageant, right? And then you think of that and you think of taking that and, amplifying it. And how many different pageants like that are going on, and who these women are, and how they can actually, be really powerful in that regard. So another reason I chose to get involved was because, again, before pageantry was looked at as something it was something for women in their 20s. There was an age cutoff. There were certain expectations. That's not like that anymore. I am in my 40s. I have 3 children. And so I want to change I want to change the narrative that sits around that. But ultimately, it's creating awareness for Mental Health Canada. And that's very dear to my heart. So yes, I'm doing Miss Universe Canada this year. It's going to be a whole new area for me, but it's going to bring into play all those things we talked about. As a therapist, how do we take care of our own mental wellness? How do we, balance the different areas of our lives? Do we get seen as just any one thing? Can we fulfill different roles and be respected in each one of them? So these are all things that I wanted again, I like to go around and just skirt around the box a little bit. So this is my way of doing it. And also it's a message to my daughters. 2 of my 3 children are 2 young girls. And I want to say to them, hey, you know what? You can do all of it. You don't have to get stuck in a box. I spent a lot of my 20s trying to be taken seriously. And now I want to spend a lot of the next part of my years saying, now that I can be taken seriously, I want to be able to explore other areas of my life and say, I can still be taken seriously while I play all these other roles as well.
Wow. And that's such a journey too, just going from your 20s and having those early experiences to now. Yeah. And you're right. I think it's so important to change the narrative on that and just beauty in general, right? I mean, you can be stunningly beautiful, successful in your 40s and 50s and 60s. It doesn't have to just be the 20-year-old game, for even just things like pageants. I love the idea of shifting the narrative. I think that's so important and so important for our young girls to see as well.
Yeah.
Kind of empowerment. And I feel, me being in my 40s, I feel more confident and more steady in who I am now than I ever have been in my life, and so just really, again, continuing to promote that and that growth can continually happen over time.
Right. I always think that to myself. I'm like, imagine if I had all of that back in my 20s, like Benjamin Button, Right.
I know, but you're doing it now. You've got a lot of time to make a big difference. And I know you're making a big difference. And just while you're doing all of these things, we've already mentioned a few things, but how do you maintain your mental wellness while balancing life, family, work, travel?
So, I think one of them by just choosing to move to different places and really loving the environments that I'm in. I remember reading this little meme or something years ago about how, create a life for yourself that's beautiful, not one that you have to take a vacation from. I really took that to heart. And I said, hey, you know what? I am going to go design a life for myself where I don't have to feel like I ever have to take a vacation from it. So I love what I do. I spend a lot of time with my kids, and I spend a lot of time meditating. And now my one thing that I sort of every year I ask myself, what's the one thing you want to do this year? And when I was sitting down with the kids, sometimes they'll be doing their artwork. And I said, I'm going to do that too. And then I started doing artwork, and I said, hey, I used to do this as a kid and I really loved it. And then I said to myself, I'm going to take the time to do this. So we sit down and we draw and we paint or whatever the art form is. Sometimes I look up and the kids are gone and I'm sitting there by myself. And so art is my new form, something that I once upon a time told myself I don't have time for. I'm going back to those things. So art's my new release right now. But yeah, meditation, I enjoy it. I don't spend hours in it, but it's just a little bit of self-awareness, beginning of the day, end of the day. And art, that's my new outlet, and not my new old outlet.
Absolutely. Being creative. I love that too. It's something that me and my son, I have a 12-year-old son, and he loves to paint. And so we just always have our paint supplies ready whenever we're in the mood or the mode to do that, and sit down and do that for hours. And I just see him completely relax, from whatever he had going on in the day. And so I love that you have that as a creative outlet, or rediscovered it again. And the meditation, time with family. And I think one of the most important things too is loving what you do. We do so much of our jobs, and it takes up so much of our time in our life. And so I do find that to be so valuable to really love what you do. And I can tell that just by seeing that in your face and by hearing you talk about it, I can tell that you love what you do.
No, I do. I do. I'm blessed to be in this profession, and I'm happy to have found it early on in life. And I'm also really happy in the way this industry is moving. It's
Mm-hmm.
becoming so inclusive in terms of what we welcome in as wellness and the therapy and just all the aspects of it. I, there's this, once upon a time, we'd look at it as if a client walked through the door, if a patient walked through the door, or I guess figuratively, like on screen when you met them
Mm-hmm.
online. It used to be like, something is wrong with me and I'm here to fix it. This was the way we looked at it or
Mm-hmm.
approached it. And now we look at it as, okay, we have these areas of our life and we're just bringing it into balance. And there's something we can look at the areas of competency, areas of strength, and depend on those while we're rebalancing out other areas of our life. And I like to look at that in that aspect. That's not how I was taught. That was not the
Mm-hmm.
school of thought I came from. It was like you diagnosed someone, they had a specific problem, and we had to now go and fix this problem. And now it's more like, no, we've all got problems, or we've got areas that are out of balance. Let's just knock things back into balance and let's just see how we can do this together. It's more of a holistic and it's more of a partnership, as opposed to I'm the doctor, I'm the professional, and you're the person, something's wrong with you. No, it's more of this partnership where let's work together, and the ownership is on the person to just be more empowered to do it for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that approach
Yes.
better, and that's where the industry is moving. So I love that.
Mhm. I think that's really important too. I think it's extremely important to be able to build somebody up and have them recognize that they do have strengths inside of them, while also helping them tackle the hard things too, and almost
Yeah.
being like their coach or their guide instead of seeing it as a problem to be fixed. The imbalance. I really like that you said that. It's imbalanced, and we're going to help you kind of create a better balance for yourself. And how would that feel if you had that? And invite them into that process with you. So before we end, I just want to ask, I know you have a lot of things coming up, but is there anything that you're really excited to share about as far as your next steps, or anything that anybody can do to find you on these big next steps that you have coming up before we're done?
Um, right now I'm very excited about launching Learn, Travel, Play Global
Mm-hmm.
Initiatives, the website. I really feel it's going to be a place where we can continue to share and grow what's happening in the community. My work continues on through executive therapy coach and, through sharing, and now with a lot that I'm taking on with mental health Canada with that organization. There's a lot of like little events that we're planning and doing, gearing up to Miss Universe Canada. So that's a little bit of what I'm focused on. But really, it's just every day is exciting. Every day is
Mm-hmm.
there's just something going on every single day. So I'm just excited about all of it. I'm here to
Mm-hmm.
serve. And I just find new and fun ways to do it. But really, at the heart of all of it is just the patients that I work with, to see them just have new insights all the time, become just a little bit more confident in being able to handle certain situations. I find my joy in that. So the more I can do in that field, the better it is for me. And I'm excited to hear about your retreats and those
Mm-hmm.
coming, like bring one of them along to one of the bases I'm
Yes, hmm,
at.
absolutely. I've definitely thought about that. I've been invited. There's some places in Thailand I'd love to check out. So
Yeah.
that could be a continued conversation, because yes, I do believe that the wellness and balance is so important to keep us doing what we do best, and it helps us to be better for ourselves, and it's better for our jobs, better for our families, and longevity, so we can keep doing it and keep doing it well. So
Yeah.
absolutely. And it's been such a fantastic conversation with you. Thank you for your time, because I understand, I recognize how many things you have going on. So thank you for giving us your time today.
Oh, thank you so much for reaching out, and thanks for creating spaces for people in our profession to share what they're doing. It's all important, it's all valuable. And the more of this we do
Mhm.
and create that awareness, the more you're connecting every individual out there to a resource.
Yeah,
So thank you
absolutely.
for doing what you're doing as well, and for reaching out to me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I think it does help to make the world a little bit smaller, and help us to be more
It does.
connected. So thank you for joining me on Mental Health Without Borders. It's been an incredible conversation, and I hope you found some valuable insights to take with you. Remember, no matter where you are in the world or where you come from, your mental wellness truly matters. So be patient with yourself, take time for your well-being, and never forget that seeking help is a sign of strength. So be kind to yourself, and I look forward to connecting with you next time on Mental Health Without Borders.